On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Yosi Dediashvili-Drossos. He is the co-founder and CTO at City Hive, and we're going to be talking about not curating for the 80%. We're going to dive in and talk about what that means. Yosi has built a pretty impressive platform to help small brands get identified, and we'll talk to him a little bit about that and about the challenges of getting there and some of what his mission-driven platform is doing and a couple other things as well. Yosi, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. All right. Tell everyone what City Hive does before we dive in.
So City Hive prides itself with being kind of the engine that powers the e-commerce of the liquor industry. So we started with the retail, like website, mobile apps for liquor stores. And we kind of pushed up ourselves to the brands, providing like D2C tools for the brands to market to the consumers on these websites. Also letting them kind of develop micro marketplaces for them to sell almost like directly to consumers. And then we started bridging the middle, which is the B2B world, which is like a very big market. It's basically distribution, passing the alcohol from the brands and suppliers to the retailers. So it's like the one-stop shop almost like for the whole industry.
Absolutely. I guess, before we dive in, I did have a question that just came to me. Obviously the liquor business has some unique constraints other industries, especially direct-to-consumer brands, might not be identifying for. When you look at your platform, and you mentioned where you started, was your intention from the beginning to be, work across the supply chain, or was the business really just niche in the beginning and it's just kind of grown from there?
So very early on, we didn't have that big vision back then. That's how they start. Very early on, we were looking for a way to kind of get into businesses, brick and mortar businesses, with the idea of if we knew what they have live in inventory and we had the ability to kind of send orders to them, then we could build all sorts of applications on top that are highly localized. Right? So if basically shops in your neighborhood, if you knew what they have in stock, you could build all sorts of things on top. And we just started with liquor stores completely randomly, just based on like a demo we had in place back then. And we figured that, well, if we provide them with an full-blown e-commerce mobile apps for their consumers, it kind of ticks the boxes for these for what we needed, because we need to know what they have in inventory and we need the ability to send them orders. So that's kind of how we set ourselves kind of for success in the beginning. And just randomly what we discovered was that it's a very big market. There's a very high demand for like liquor stores for mobile apps for liquor stores. So that's kind of how the business started kind of to grow. It was just kind of that specific angle.
Absolutely. Yeah. I guess if you're looking back now and kind of looking at how the business has grown, you guys are definitely a broader platform, and you can look now, the dots do connect together. I mean, it all makes sense when you do look back and when you look at the journey to get here. And the reason I ask is if there's a founder out there that, is focusing on a niche market, or maybe it's too broad, right? So the power of what you described sounds like you really honed in on a specific problem. You identified it. You focused on that. The growth of the platform was unanticipated because success. At what point did you start realizing you guys had something that could be expanded? Like what did you start seeing that was like, you know what? We got something that could grow a little bit more broadly in scope.
So we can kind of break it down to multiple like stages. The first one was kind of after we had like a significant amount of like liquor stores just using mobile apps. They approached us actually and kind of saying, well, what about our websites? So that kind of opened us up to that place, which effectively put us in that spot of like everything e-commerce for the business. So that's kind of, because from there you quickly kind of jump into like engagement, email marketing, text, all of that stuff that you expect from like the e-commerce world to tackle. So that was kind of growth number one. With that, as we grew that, we became more and more interested in the industry, to various sizes of businesses, still at the retail level, but you can think like you start with small liquor stores, but then you expand to like larger and larger chains until you get to like the largest chains in the country. And so that was one aspect. But effectively, once that happens, it's a whole supply chain. So once you're working with the big guys, then they work with the big brands. So now the big brands come to you. It's like, hey, what can we do on the platform so that this and that business will benefit? Right? Because it's a whole ecosystem that starts to build up. So it's that's kind of what pushed us to kind of keep advancing and kind of climbing up the ladder, if you want to think about it in terms of the supply chain. But what kind of kept us focused was more of the idea that this needs to have a purpose here. It's not just having relationship with businesses. Like if you have I like to think of it as like if you have a good like a compass that tells you, hey, this is the goal, right? Remember, there is what the brands are trying to do is sell their product, right? What the distributors are trying to do in the market is kind of distribute to more and more locations so that there's more consumption of that. So that's what the retail stores want. So if you keep everything kind of pointed towards the same direction, it makes sense. If you start off and like separate things that don't really tackle the same problem, you're kind of going all sorts of ways, and that's kind of falling apart essentially.
Absolutely. I guess if you don't have history within the liquor alcohol business, this is maybe context
as you should.
Yeah, well, exactly. When you look at the ecosystem, right, and maybe outside of just you guys, a more general context, when you look at the ecosystem, how difficult is it for brands and distributors to gain access, to gain supply chain logistics? Like, talk to us a little bit about what that world looks like.
So alcohol in the US in general is very complicated because of the prohibition laws in the past and kind of all the history that comes from there and the consequences of that. What that created is a very, very fragmented market. And it starts with just the legal stuff. Right, you have states that cannot ship alcohol to other states. You have regulation on like the time of day at which you can sell alcohol. You have days you can't sell alcohol. You have weird taxation rules. You have taxation on like a volume of alcohol on a drink. You have taxation of like the size of the bottle. All sorts of things like that. So what that created is kind of a very complicated market for software solutions to kind of exist in, right? Because you need to develop software such that it curates for the Illinois market. And you need a different one that behaves completely differently for Florida, right? You could have all sorts of rules like that. So it was very hard for like to end up with a case where you have like unified software for the whole industry. And like if you think like and today if you think like coffee shops, right, it's probably Square is very common, right? It's if you develop something for Square, you develop something for like 50% of the coffee shops. You don't have that phenomena in the liquor industry. So that started at the retail, but from there it propagates all the way. So what it means is that anyone that's trying to do anything, it's very hard for them to actually know what happens, because it's very hard for them to get the actual data underneath, like integration with the point of sale, so that you know what's selling, how much it costs, like all of that stuff. So the result is kind of, again, the whole supply chain is very inefficient. The brands know what they sell within a month, maybe, and that's just by sampling a very small amount of businesses. And then from there, you go down to distribution and the retail. Anything you try to build there is kind of very, very weak in terms of like how much data you actually have. So the way we kind of were approaching it was like, okay, let's put a very strong effort on getting accurate data as much as we can and build on top of very strong fundamentals. That's kind of the big shift here.
And what's interesting is, as you were mentioning that, I was thinking about brands that we see in beverages. We've all heard in the last 5-10 years of brands that have gone from unknown to being worth hundreds of millions, billions of dollars being acquired. That's a different, I think, phenomenon than we see in the liquor industry. I don't see as many small brands growing to that scale. I mean, it does happen. I think it seems to me that there's some complexity. When you look at the industry overall and you look at that complexity that exists, and you just mentioned all the different laws, all the different scenarios for different states and different regulations, I could see those are huge obstacles for a tiny brand who wants to scale to have to deal with. I mean, talk to us a little bit about that challenge when you're a small brand in the alcohol business trying to gain market share.
So because of regulations, if you were a brand now launching a product, you can't sell to consumers. The exception to that would be if you are a winery with like a special license to sell wine, etc. But that's not what we're talking about. If you're talking about like a new tequila coming into the market or something like that, the challenge they face is, first of all, they cannot sell to consumer. It has to go through that 3-tier system. It has to go to distribution and then to liquor stores selling it. So just from the get-go, you're like, who's going to distribute me? Right, so you're trying to find someone that will kind of see yourself as worthy to them, right? So that they can distribute you. And then from there, you're trying to figure out your coverage, like where are you actually being sold? Because the distributors, they know who they're selling to, not necessarily if they are selling it, right? They don't know that the liquor stores are actually selling the product that they're distributing. So the whole thing here is you're trying to introduce a new product, but you need to solve this whole chain of challenges along the way. And that's something that every brand is basically, any new product that comes into the market, unless you're part of like a big, family of brands, you're going to have that challenge. You're going to have to figure out distribution, not just for get into the liquor store, but get into the consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess, it's interesting as you said something to me when we were speaking about not curating for the 80% and having a platform that allows smaller brands, even single SKU brands, to gain visibility. I guess talk to us a little bit about that, and is that capability fairly new to these brands from what you know? Yeah,
so if you break down the challenge, it has, again, it's like any other complicated situation. It has multiple facets to it. So one challenge is gaining distribution so that you can be distributed to stores so that consumers can buy your product. That's a challenge that today we're kind of starting to play with, but we don't really have a good solution. But we definitely acknowledge that it is a challenge for any small brand, any new SKU that is being introduced for like a dedicated brand. Then there's the second challenge, which is making the businesses aware. So the retailers, giving them a reason to kind of start and thinking, should we even get this product? Why should we offer it to our consumers? So City Hive is somewhat in a unique position here because we have direct communication with them, but we also power their e-commerce kind of wall in that sense. So this puts us in a place where it's very easy for us to kind of bridge that gap, right? With, let's say, like one thing we're doing is a solution where, okay, let's assume you got the product to the stores, but you as a brand, you're trying to control your destiny. So you still want to market your product. Maybe you want to run ads on Instagram or TikTok, etc. Right? And so consumers will be exposed to the product, but then you're kind of being faced with the challenge of you can't sell to the consumer. So what are you doing? So like one strategy in the past is you partner with one store and they do shipping, right? So you kind of figure out, fine, they can ship to 40 states out of the 50, etc. But it's not enough because this is 2025. If you're buying something, you want to get it now, not in like 3 days. So City Hive is in a unique position because we have that access to the store. We know what they're selling. We can send them orders. And we also have the brand on the other side. So we developed this like micro marketplace where basically the brand can sell directly on their website, but it's not really the brand. It's just the store selling. You're just facilitating. It's your web page, right? And it's your code and design. But at the end of the day, the transaction and the payment goes to the liquor store that is authorized to sell to you. And most likely you're actually going to get it same day, even like within an hour, because it's just a store in your neighborhood. But kind of this is tackling actually if you have big distribution. The middle tier is kind of the challenge. That's where we're looking to achieve connectivity between all the tiers here, where maybe the brand can just distribute like marketing to the store saying, hey, we're launching this new product. This is why it's interesting. This is that's our marketing strategy. This is why you should stock up, right? All of these things that are completely automated and kind of putting it in a place where it's like just a few clicks and everything falls through and everything kind of falls into place and you can start running marketing for your product, basically.
I guess, it's very interesting because as you've been describing this platform, it's grown in breadth. Obviously started off very narrow. It started off very focused, and now you're servicing new areas, giving opportunity to little people, giving a voice to brands that otherwise would be hard to discover. As a founder, sometimes we hear a lot about, pivoting versus not pivoting. When do you broaden out your services? How niche is too niche? I guess, when you look at the liquor industry, it's big. I mean, it's multi-billions and billions of dollars. When you look at the concept of niche, obviously it's a subset of beverages. When you originally set out and you were going, hey, we're going to do this and we're doing a very small piece of this supply chain in the beginning, did you think about how niche your offering was? Was that part of the strategy and going, hey, listen, if we focus on this area and we dominate it, that's not a bad thing?
So originally the focus, very early on, we understood that the key point is that what we were trying to curate is for kind of businesses in the neighborhood. Like we're not thinking like big warehouses with products, etc., but rather every city, in every neighborhood, you have a bunch of stores, liquor stores, grocery stores, like etc., selling stuff. No one knows what they have on inventory. You have to go there and you have to buy. If all that information was available, like almost like in real time, and like on an online platform, then that becomes very interesting and you can build stuff on top of it. This is kind of how we started. And with time, we like to jump around that idea just, to keep our horizon like nice and clear. But in some cases, you have to zoom in and to narrow it down because the opportunities actually come when you start narrowing down. Because if you were just looking at it as just the inventory of the neighborhood, then maybe you can build like a marketplace. You can do something like that. Right? We see that obviously out there in the world. But what's challenging there is that you don't get to build like the strong relationships because if you're now trying to empower a brand on top of that network, you don't necessarily have a good incentive because you're not really representing the businesses in there. You are like a marketplace solution trying to push consumers to buy from you. Right, that's kind of what you're trying to do. Versus if you're actually needing to understand what are the challenges for the stores, you actually need to figure out, well, I can't just make them have a case of this brand if it's a bad brand. Like if no one's going to buy the brand, how am I going to solve? Like there needs to be some good incentive here and guarantees that this is like we're not screwing up the business at the end of the day. Right? So having this like zooming into that specific market allows you to actually hone in on the problem and understand what needs to be solved. Because it's not just creating the connectivity, it's actually understanding why is it not working today. And all of these things are very dependent on the industry itself that you're in. And in our case, it's the liquor industry. It's probably, it looks different. Maybe there's some things that are similar in others, but it's a different set of problems, basically. So that's the value of kind of zooming into that, because then you can really connect the tiers and the supply chain.
I love that. That's fantastic. I guess, out of curiosity, you guys are obviously doing very well. You guys are growing the business. You're expanding. You mentioned trying to address small businesses. Is there thoughts of growing the platform, going past the liquor and alcohol business, or there's enough runway? You're like, hey, let's finish this out first.
No, we are looking to other industries. It's especially tempting as you're growing, because you have the certificate of like, I know how to do it. But we're really trying to balance the two aspects, because as we're growing in that industry, you're seeing how much more potential you have, kind of what you're leaving on the table. So we're looking, one reason we're looking on expansion to other areas, also just from understanding the life is not as clear cut. Right? Even within the liquor industry, you're looking at businesses that they sell wine, they sell liquor, but also they have like a food bar, and they have like, you can buy food directly from them, like cheese and like stuff like that. So how do you have a platform that supports both of these things in a coherent way? So that having these capabilities and having kind of looking at other industries allows you to kind of generalize better when you think about that. So for us, it's also a way to challenge our own system and understanding, well, we will decide do we need to change some things to allow us to be actually flexible when we're trying to implement similar things, but maybe like in other areas. So we kind of constantly challenge ourselves. Like, for example, we're looking at like pet shops and like plumbing supplies and like all sorts of things that are completely different in terms of what the product is, but in some sense, it's also very similar, right? Because it's the same story. You have stores around you, they have products on the shelves. No one knows what they have, and etc. But where we really put the focus is still in the liquor industry, because of that whole supply chain connectivity, which is something you can build the tech, but at the end of the day, there is a lot of relationship that needs to be built across like the full supply chain.
I love that. That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think a lot of times, when you hear about founders and their approach and the problems they're trying to solve, I'm starting to see consistent focus on a specific group, a demographic of who you're trying to help. And then the pieces are just about timing. It's about capabilities, about what is working, what isn't working. I think if you have that North Star early, then you find these opportunities, as you just, you discussed with us, moving into these other areas. So I think that's fantastic. I guess if you had any advice, especially working in, I don't know if I call it regulated, but maybe we'll say that the liquor business is regulated. I think it's fair to say it's regulated. If a founder is wanting to tackle something in a regulated industry, there's a little bit different nuances. Is there any advice from your learnings of having to deal with a regulated industry as a startup founder that you could share?
I think a good advice would be not to think you will solve it all either way. And I would approach it from just tackling the challenges as they kind of come through your way. If you're trying to really trying to solve it from, okay, let me learn how this industry works, right? And then I'll be able to develop the perfect taxation system for the liquor industry, right? You will just keep working at building the perfect taxation system. You won't really have a business at the end of the day. If you actually approach it from, okay, let's look at it, let's try to enter this market. What are the challenges there? And kind of cycle through that, you're going to be much more successful, I think, because it is indeed, as you get into legal, right, the answers are sometimes not clear and the actions are even less clear, right, at that point, like what should be done. So I think just tackling it in a realistic way kind of will take you a long way. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love it. Yosi, I appreciate your time. If somebody does have a follow-up question for you, maybe something you mentioned, or they have a question, curiosity, other fellow founders, is there a good way of connecting with you?
Just through LinkedIn. It's Yosi Dediashvili. It's a unique name. You'll find it easily. Yeah.
Okay, definitely. I love it. Again, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. That's it for this episode. Be back again. Different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I think the topic of what Yosi and team of theirs built is really fantastic. He talked about the growth of the company, the focus of the company, some of the challenges within the liquor industry and what they've had to deal with in that regulated industry and the opportunity ahead of them. So share this episode with somebody else who might benefit from it. I'd really appreciate that. Also, please like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the show's going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.